you start to understand for yourself what works for your creations and what doesn't. That's experience. So the color wheel will be helpful to you. But it won't be an axiom that you absolutely have to follow, because your creations will be uniquely yours and they will reflect you and express exactly what you want to say. So we've sorted out the materials. Now I'll tell you how to make a pattern and how to calculate the shrinkage coefficient. How do we make the pattern for a hat? It's all pretty simple. We take a rectangle like this and, well, we shape it as we like, right? Like this line here. Here is the pattern. See, take a look. And here we also make a slant like this. How do we calculate all these measurements? Well, you take the head circumference, right? And you multiply it by the coefficient you have. Well, my coefficient here is, honestly, pretty extreme 1.5. And for the length, it's 2.2. But that's my coefficient. Yours might be a little different. I'll explain the principle to you now, and then you can calculate what you need. So look, here's how we're going to work. So not quite like that. Now I'll draw the head and show you the principle of constructing the pattern. This will be our head after we've done. See, small. So how are we going to lay it out? Here, we will do it in a single direction, just like this. Then we will have a visual layout that looks exactly like this. Where is the single direction one? Right here, at the very bottom of the head. Then the whole area like this is laid out in a way called Kozik. And then we'll fill it in with viscose in this direction. So watch how I calculate the enlargement coefficient. I made the pattern with some kind of arbitrary coefficient. Well, you can use mine. Most likely, since I'm teaching you in this masterclass, you'll be using my coefficient as well. And here, for example, I took a head circumference of 28 and we multiply it by 1.5, which gives us 42. This will be the distance that you mark off right here. I take the length of the hat as 57. This distance, from which I make this slightly smooth transition, is 15 centimeters for me. Here it is, right here on the pattern, this distance is 15 centimeters. Remember, the total distance is 57. And my coefficient is 2.2. How did I calculate this? Look, I had a pattern, here it is, with a length of 57 and a width of 42. When I felted the hat, it turned out like this, with a length of 26 and a width of 28. What do? I divide 42, look, please, by 28, by what I ended up with, and I find that my coefficient is 1.5. I do the same with this distance. I divide 57 by 26, and I get a coefficient of about 2.2. These are my coefficients. After today's masterclass, you'll have your own coefficients, which you'll use for your next project, based on how your hand lays out the materials, what kind of wool you use, which is also important, and your felting technique. And you'll adjust accordingly. But the main scheme is exactly like this. So, all our materials and tools are ready, which means we can get started. What will our sequence of steps be? In general, what makes it challenging to make a hat like this with texture on all sides? You could just do it on the front part, which is pretty simple, and then you wouldn't need to do all the manipulations I'm going to show you today. But with these hats, the biggest challenge, well, I think it's mostly for beginners, because if you have experience, it probably won't be difficult for you is making the transition from the front to the back, so that there aren't any creases in the viscose or wool or any unattractive transitions. So what do I suggest? First, I lay out the wool and viscose on one side and then on the other side. After that, I arrange the decor. and it will be easy to tuck it over to the other side. In other words, this method of working will prevent you from ending up with, say, pieces of wool that aren't covered by viscose, or bits of viscose that end up under the wool, basically. You won't have any of those odd, unclear situations. So our workflow is as follows. First, the wool, then the viscose, then on the other side, wool, viscose, and then the decor. Then we get started. So I'll show you my method of working with wool, which allows you to achieve such a thin felt. Because, well, again, this is based on my experience and the way my hands work. You might have your own completely different approach. And what will it be like? Well, that's entirely up to you, because my own methods have changed over time. I mean, I can say that 10 years ago, I worked with roving one way, 5 years ago another way, and 3 years ago yet another. Even a year ago, my approach was completely different. So everything changes over time and with experience. Here's how I do it now. I don't tear off a big piece right away. I mean, I don't take a large chunk with me and hold it in my hand or keep it nearby or in my pocket. But I used to do that, yes. If you've seen my earlier masterclasses, you know all about that. Here. At the moment, I do it like this. I take a skein and tear off a piece. Before, you and I, remember, first divided by 2. Yes. Then we divided it probably into 3 or perhaps 2 distinct sections. We shared. Now you and I will divide it into 4 parts.
It's thick, by the way.
It's the same as it always was.
Really?
It doesn't change. The skein of wool stays the same, but the way we work with it changes. And now, these small pieces, yes, I take and divide them into 4 parts. And I'll be working with these parts. So, first of all, I don't. How do I put this? The main wool, the one that's lying there, doesn't get stuck together. Secondly, it's much more convenient for me to work with these small pieces. Look, let's start laying it out. So I'm going to lay it out from the bottom up.